Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is SockBot, and today I'm going to be talking about character creation within dreams. So if that is something that is interesting to you, if you like this sort of faster tips and more specific video, well, feel free to leave a like down below. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more, but no pressure as always. So like I said, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about character creation. It's something that I'm not incredibly experienced with, but which I'm working on becoming more experienced at, and like with everything on this channel, I like to share my experience and sort of tell you how I learned something, so that hopefully, as other amateur game creators out there, you can sort of take that and learn things a little bit quicker than I did. For example, this tip is based on something I talk about a lot, which has to do with using other people's community objects and assets in general, but in this video, it will be applied to logic specifically. Now, I've talked about this probably since my channel started, but a lot in general, because the community of Little Big Planet, and now the community of Dreams, is made for this purpose. As amateur game creators, we don't have the time or the capacity to make all of this stuff ourselves, and more importantly, when you look at how people create AAA games, they're copying a lot of stuff too. You ever seen Resident Evil 4? Well, pretty much every single texture in that game is taken from a photograph, not necessarily made in studio. And the logic for those types of games is even more so copied from game to game. And I think that that's one of the things that, as amateur game creators, when we're starting completely from scratch, we don't quite realize. They have their studios that will give them the assets and get the rights for everything, but we have the community. And so, since I started in Dreams, I've been slowly learning to create my own aesthetic and modify other assets to suit my needs and fit my aesthetic within any game that I'm creating. The only thing I haven't done this for is logic, and so for this specific character, I needed to add the ability to climb. I tried to make it myself, and I spent quite a few hours trying to do that, but I realized that the way that I was thinking about it was very complicated and honestly probably already somewhere on the Dreamiverse. So what I did was I ended up searching up a few different puppets on the Dreamiverse, on the community. I found 3 or 4, and only one that seemed to suit my needs with a timed climb. In other words, a sort of thing that could be combined with a strength meter to only allow the character to climb for a certain amount of time. And also something that wasn't super externally connected. What I mean by this is when I opened up the logic of this puppet, again, something you can do by holding out down L1 and pressing X on the character, and then looking at that little microchip at their feet on the little character platform. When I looked at that and I found the circuit for each of these different characters I was considering to sort of use as my base, this one specifically had a circuit board that was marked climbing logic. That was super great, and it made it a lot easier to find out where that logic was in particular. Additionally, though, I didn't narrow it down much by that because a few of the others had the same sort of circuit board. What I found from this one specifically, and what I recommend if you're trying to find logic like this for your character, is to make sure that the external connections from that circuit board to either the controller within that character or the character itself, which is accessed by holding L1 and pressing square on the actual character, are minimal. In this case, I think there are about 8 of them, which sounds like a lot, but compared to some of the other ones I was looking at, with 30 plus, it really isn't. And the reason why you want to look for less of these is to make sure that when you're copying it to your new character, you don't essentially have to recreate the entire logic board yourself while you're trying to copy it, because that would kind of ruin the purpose. Or, in other words, if you end up spending more time connecting all of these wires and comparing them between each character to make sure you've connected all of them, you're going to have a lot more place to make mistakes, and without actually understanding the logic within inside that circuit board specifically, like this wall climb one for example, it's going to be a lot harder for you to sort of QA that process. So from there, once I found a really good candidate, I opened up my character circuit board and that character circuit board, and also opened up the actual logic chip that's inside of the character's group. Once I had all of those open, I was able to look at the wall climb circuit, copy it over to my character directly, which immediately removes all external connections from it in the new copy that you've made, and then look at how the initial one on the basic puppet was connected to the character circuit board, and again, that circuit board that's inside the character's base. And as I went there, I looked at that compared to my current character, went to each tab that was referenced in the ones that were actually connected, and made sure to connect everything exactly the same way. Pretty simple, right? The difficult part here is when it comes to animations. Animations are something that you can't copy between characters as far as I'm aware. For me, that's not really a problem. I've had a little bit of, I guess, experience, you could call it, with this character before creating animations. And in general, if you're scared of that, go ahead and give it a try with different keyframes. It's really not that hard to manipulate the character in a way that looks natural if you just grab them inside of a keyframe. They tend to move around in believable ways as long as you put the positions that they end in as sort of believable. And so from there, I recreated these two keyframes right here to match the keyframes of the original character. I modified the position slightly to sort of suit the smaller character I was working with, but I did actually use the exact same climbing positions. In this one, for example, there were two climbing positions. One was right hand up, right foot down, left hand down. I believe I got that right. And the other one was the opposite. It's an easy two keyframes to recreate, and while I wish I could just create one keyframe and reverse it, I guess creating two different keyframes that are supposed to be mirrors does give the character a little more of a personality when he's climbing. But once I recreated those two keyframes and reconnected all that logic, I had a character that could climb. And lucky for this sort of a circuit board, I'd looked ahead for this, but also not completely examined it. I was able to find that the different modifiers in this, for example, that timer I mentioned that only allows the character to climb for a certain amount of time, was labeled. Thank goodness I was able to just go in there and increase the climbing time, because before it was about 2 seconds, and in addition to that I was able to go into the advanced mover that's within this circuit board to sort of lower the speed to something that would make more sense for a character that's about half the size of the first one, and also a lower speed that the camera could actually follow. Maybe not quite low enough for the camera to follow, but we'll work on that later in another video. But all of those sort of modifications were made in the span of 20 minutes. I mean, you are watching me do it in live time on this with certain parts sped up because they were just completely useless. But the full clip here is legitimately 20 minutes long, and I went from having a character that had no ability to climb to a character that could climb any surface at all. Now, if I wanted to add other things, like make sure that only specific surfaces were climbable, I'd have to make certain modifications to that too, but that's a lot easier to make than the climbing logic itself. For this one, I haven't done it yet, but my assumption is that I'm going to add a tag to every object so that if the character is touching that object, as they have to be when they're climbing based on this logic, that character turns on the circuit board that has the climbing logic in it. So therefore, if they're not next to that, if they're not touching that specific piece of wall, they won't be able to actually climb anything. And that's a really simple thing to add, especially considering how complex the base logic is. So what is the point of this video? Well, obviously, I don't think a lot of you out there are going to go find this exact puppet and copy this exact logic to the exact same character. But hopefully, seeing my experience and a few tips as to what to look out for when you're trying to find a good piece of logic to use can help you when you're trying to figure out how to do this for your own character. And more importantly, sort of demystify the idea of adding new abilities to characters, because honestly, pretty much every ability that you find out in the wild can be used in this way. It's just going to take more time for you to look through, make sure you're having all the same connections, and in some cases, if you do want to modify very specific things, understanding a little bit about what logic is there. But in general, for anything like this, you don't have to understand the whole thing, but as you go through this, as you try, and as you look at other people's logic, it's going to help you learn how to do it yourself, and more importantly, once you've done this once, it will become far easier to do for other sorts of things. For example, if you want to copy any sort of logic to any kind of puppet, whether they be a character or an enemy in general. I hope this video was helpful to you. I thought it was a very short and easy thing to talk about that could help a lot of people, I certainly hope, because it's been intimidating me for weeks, and it's one of the reasons why I saved this specific logic piece directly for the end. Well, that and because I was just having a really good time sculpting giant soda bottles or beer bottles that explode, but I hope this was helpful for you. If it was, feel free to let me know down in the comments below. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them for me. I don't do a lot of specific tutorials for exact objects, like, for example, the circuit board inside of this thing that I copied. But if you are interested in that, let me know. But regardless, my name is SockBot. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you're all doing well, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. But for now, goodbye, everybody.